join me in welcoming Barry Zwicker and Annie Michon.
Now, what I would like to do, what we agreed to do, is to find out first from you people where you stand on 9/11, what your take is about the events of 9/11. And so what I'm going to do is just give you 4 choices. They pretty well cover the waterfront as far as ideas about 9/11 are concerned. I'll give you 4 choices and then ask for hands up on each choice after I give them. So the first take on 9/11 would be what you might call the official story that 19 crazed Muslims outsmarted all of the U.S. intelligence and military and diplomatic and political establishments and carried off 9/11. The second would be something called the incompetence theory, and that would be that American intelligence officials knew something about the impending attack by these 19 crazed Muslims, but through various kinds of incompetence at various levels were unable to prevent or even ameliorate these events. That's the second choice. The third choice is that American intelligence knew a lot about this, but deliberately decided to allow the attacks to go ahead anyway in order to benefit whatever political goals the White House had at that time. And those first 3 have something in common. They all posit that there were, in fact, 19 crazed Muslims who did this. The fourth choice, which you could call the inside choice or made it happen on purpose theory, is that, in fact, the whole thing was planned and executed at the highest levels, and it was an inside job. So those are the 4 choices. So now I'm going to ask for hands up. You have to be honest or there's no point. How many people here believe what we have officially been told about the events of 9/11?
Which one?
The official story of 9/11 that 19 crazed Muslims...
Number 1.
That's number 1, yeah, that's what I'm asking for a hand up. Yeah. Well, we're having no hands on that one, which is not that uncommon these days. Second choice is incompetence is the basic explanation. So how many people believe that that, in fact, explains the events of that day, that there was incompetence? Yeah, so... There's a dozen of us. How many people here believe that it was allowed to happen on purpose? Which is another, about almost identical. And so finally, how many people here believe that it was an inside job? Okay. That's about 20. So we have 0, 12, 12, and 20, which is a good spread. Mm-hmm. And that gives us all a chance of knowing where we're at, and we can proceed accordingly. The questions that I've prepared for Annie I'm just going to group them into 3. First is spies and spying. By the way, Annie hasn't heard these questions. We offered to show them to her, and she said she didn't need to see them. And we all agreed it's more refreshing to have... an unrehearsed conversation here.
So we hope.
Yeah, I would hope. And also, but also I'd point out that when Bush and Clinton were in Toronto on Friday, the moderator, Frank McKenna, showed them all the questions. And so apparently that was a complete snooze fest. So we don't want to do the Bush-Clinton thing here. But we are in green chairs like they had.
We're not charging $200.
And we're not charging $200, $300, $500. So the first section of questions would be about spies and spying, and Annie knows a tremendous amount about that. Second is false flag operations in general, but 9/11 in particular. And the third is the big picture and what might we expect, what does Annie feel that we'll see for the future. So will you first just sketch out, we have 50 minutes here, maybe 45 now. Okay. How did you come to be in the spy world?
Well, I sort of fell into it by accident. I never wanted to be a spy or even thought about being a spy. After I graduated from university, I applied to a publishing house and started a career there, and then just found it slightly underwhelming. So then I applied to become a diplomat. I sat the Foreign Office exams in the UK, and then had a letter on Ministry of Defence headed notepaper, which said, we may have other jobs you find more interesting. And that freaked me out. I mean, I immediately thought, my God, it's MI5. And I was really, really frightened. I mean, what do they want with someone like me? My father, however, was with me when I opened the letter, so it's all his fault, as I always say. But he was a real spy buff, and he was also a journalist, so he was agog to find out if it was indeed MI5. So he said, oh, go on, just ring this telephone number, please, please, see what it is. And about a month later, I found myself in an unmarked office block in central London, being interviewed very intensively about my life from the age of 12. And then it took about 10 months to recruit me. It was a very intensive process, many, many interviews, role plays, assessments, interviews with psychiatrists, senior intelligence officers, that type of thing. And it went on for months, and there was also the vetting process. And because it's MI5, you always think they know everything about you already. So you just throw everything at them, and they still wanted me back. And there were quite a lot of discussions as well about their ethics and the sort of work that they were now planning to do, because when I was recruited in 1990, they had shifted, they told me, their focus of work away from political activism and Reds under the bed, and they wanted a new type of officer who could cope with looking at counter-terrorism. And they had long discussions about the ethics. Should we intern people, put them in prison without trial? Is it right to shoot to kill? Is it right to torture? All those sort of things. And my views were the same then as they are now. And I told them all this, and they still kept inviting me back. So I was very surprised, really, when they finally offered me a job, to be quite frank. But I thought, well, they know all about me. I must be right for the job.
Now, you mentioned psychiatric assessment. What, to your knowledge, are the psychological characteristics that, to be specific, MI5, to your knowledge, was looking for?
Well, interestingly, in my last year in MI5, I was actually trained up to be a recruiter. This was the first year in which they were openly trying to recruit people. They were advertising for them in the media and saying, would you like to work for MI5? And they got flooded with applicants, about 20,000 in the first round, of which they chose 5. So they had their pick of good graduates. And the sort of things they were looking for were obviously intelligence, mental intelligence, good analytical skills, good communication skills, and the ability to influence other people. So if you went out into the field and had to deal with agents, they would trust you. But also things like tenacity and an ethical framework within which you worked. So basically they wanted everything. They wanted a very rounded human being who could do a wide variety of work. And because they were MI5, and because they sounded glamorous, and because they never told the recruits exactly what they'd be getting up to,